Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really incredible document, Discussion Paper IV, to discover the exact practical tools you need to build a regenerative business literally from the inside out. Now, if you've ever felt that massive, frustrating gap between all those beautiful, high-level theories of sustainability and the messy, day-to-day reality of actually running an organization, you are in the exact right place. We're going to look at how to finally operationalize systemic redesign and turn those great ideas into grounded daily practices. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to climb a deliberate developmental ladder together, starting with the knowledge-action gap, then reclaiming environmental authorship, navigating action and reaction, unpacking our invisible backpacks, adopting the puzzle mindset, and finally, prototyping organizations. Let's jump right in. First up, Section 1. The knowledge-action gap, and exactly why theory fails in practice. So why do brilliant sustainability initiatives just completely stall out in reality? It's a question that haunts boardrooms and grassroots movements alike. The source paper diagnoses this as a persistent translational void. Basically, it's that giant empty space between knowing that systemic change is needed and actually having the psychological capacity to make it happen. Imagine sitting in a big strategy meeting. Intellectually, everybody's nodding along to a bold new 10-year eco-initiative. But internally, half the room is sweating over next week's quarterly targets. A conceptual framework is just a map, right? It tells us what has to change, but it doesn't magically fix the underlying stress and distrust that stops people from walking that path when the pressure is on. The reality is, extractive environments actively erode our agency. Did you know that chronic workplace stress literally impairs your prefrontal cortex? That's the exact part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and complex problem-solving. When we operate under chronic stress, cognitive overload, or perceived scarcity, it completely captures our bandwidth. It narrows our focus and traps us in fear-based, short-term survival modes. Listen, this isn't a failure of willpower or character. It's a structural condition caused by the environment itself. So how on earth do we break out of this trap? Moving to Section 2, reclaiming your environmental authorship. This is our first foundational step. This brings us to the very first of 4 tools introduced in the paper, the center of my environment. This simple but honestly profound concept shifts us away from being passive victims of our circumstances and turns us into active participants. It all starts with the realization that, sure, you can't control every massive structural system imposed on you, but you are the interpretive center of your own lived experience. Once you recognize that, you can start redesigning your daily routines. Hey, maybe you can't change the whole corporate hierarchy today, but you can absolutely change how you run your 9 a.m. team check-in or how you choose to respond to a panicky email. Viktor Frankl hit the nail on the head here when he noted that even under extreme conditions, the freedom to choose one's attitude towards circumstances remains completely intact. Agency, at least in this context, isn't about dominating your surroundings or forcing your will on the world. It's about responsive authorship. It is a powerful counter to the learned helplessness that extractive systems breed, proving you can absolutely co-author your reality, moment by moment. Which brings us to Section 3, navigating action and reaction. Because once we reclaim our individual agency, we still have to interact with everyone else. Notice how this whole transformation builds into a cohesive 4-step model. We're moving outward from the self, into systems, back into self-awareness, and finally reaching collective co-creation. That takes us to cultivating systems awareness. Enter the action-reaction model. This tool posits that interactions aren't just isolated events. They're unfolding processes shaped by interdependent cycles of action and response. In high-stress, fast-paced environments, we naturally default to impulsive reactivity. We've all been there, right? Firing off a passive-aggressive Slack message just because you felt slighted in a meeting. This tool introduces a deliberate, intentional pause between a stimulus and your response. By recognizing these interlocking cycles, you create real space for relational resilience. You shift away from just pointing fingers and assigning linear blame to actually understanding the broader systemic dynamics at play. Next is Section 4, unpacking your invisible backpack. This is how we master that critical space between stimulus and response. You know, every single one of us carries an invisible backpack. It's stuffed to the brim with accumulated cultural conditioning, socioeconomic experiences, and deeply ingrained emotional patterns. This third tool forces us to actually externalize all that internal baggage. Why? Well, because unexamined money psychology and internalized scarcity scripts will unconsciously control your decisions. Think about it. If you intellectually want to collaborate, but your invisible backpack is whispering there's not enough budget to go around, protect your turf, you are going to unconsciously sabotage your own regenerative efforts before they even get off the ground. So here's the crucial takeaway. When we finally unpack that backpack, we actively transition our internal psychology. We consciously move away from the learned helplessness and hyper-competition of extractive systems, and we intentionally build the agency and cooperative capability needed for regenerative ones. It literally disentangles your identity from pure financial productivity, clearing the way for much healthier, future-oriented decision-making. All right, Section 5, Adopting the Puzzle Mindset. With self-awareness locked in, we reach our final tool for translocal co-creation. The puzzle mindset is an absolute game changer for how we perceive diversity at work. Extractive systems teach us to view differences as competitive threats and to hide our personal imperfections at all costs. The puzzle mindset flips that entirely upside down. It frames your unique combination of skills, limitations, and even vulnerabilities as an essential, irreplaceable piece of a larger collective whole. Suddenly, diversity isn't a liability. It is a massive source of systemic intelligence. Think about a literal jigsaw puzzle. If every piece was just a perfect, smooth square, the whole thing wouldn't hold together. It's the jagged edges, the weird shapes, the sharp contrast between pieces. That's exactly what makes a strong relational fit possible. You don't have to be perfect. Your unique piece actually relies on the edges of others to build a resilient system. It creates true non-zero-sum collaboration. Interdependence completely shifts from being a weakness to being your team's most critical resource. Finally, Section 6, Prototyping Regenerative Organizations. How do we take these micro tools and scale them up? The paper makes it clear. Practitioners have to embed these tools into everyday governance. You absolutely must lead by example. Before even finalizing a business model, founding teams need to surface their own internal narrative so they don't just reproduce old extractive patterns. You have to design for distributed governance, using that puzzle mindset. And crucially, you've got to shift how you measure success. Pure financial indicators just aren't enough anymore. You need to track capacity-building metrics. Are you actively measuring psychological safety? Are you tracking relational trust right alongside quarterly profits? Because that is how you build a truly resilient foundation. Now, I have to tell you, we have barely scratched the surface today. What's absolutely fascinating is that discussion paper IV dives deep into how these 4 tools aren't just trendy new corporate inventions. They actually have profound time-tested roots in Southern African Ubuntu philosophy, Taoist principles of Wu Wei, and indigenous kin-centric ecology. To really grasp the mechanics of how these brilliant ancient traditions scale into modern institutional prototypes, you absolutely have to read the full source text. It is a total goldmine for anyone serious about lasting systemic change. So I want to leave you with a final question to chew on as you log on or walk into your workplace tomorrow. Are your structures being driven by conscious, regenerative design or by unexamined scarcity scripts? Seriously, dive into the full discussion paper, equip yourself with these tools, and let's start building true capacity for change.